Hi there, business owner, and welcome to the 3Bs podcast, the place where we go beyond the numbers and dive into strategies to help you build a better business one step at a time. I'm your host, Stephanie, a multi-award-winning entrepreneur with over a decade of experience in the bookkeeping and accountancy world. If you're a business owner looking to streamline, grow, and get back the time that you deserve, you're in the right place. We're tackling real-world problems, answering tough questions, and digging deep into business-building secrets in just 15 minutes each week. So are you ready to build a better business with confidence and clarity? Then let's go. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the 3Bs podcast, your go-to 15 minutes of CPD certified motivation, inspiration and education to help you build a better business each week. As always, I'm your host Stephanie High, and just like the last couple of episodes, if you haven't listened to episode 115 about the 4 different types of introvert, go back and listen to that, because otherwise this won't make much sense. If you do know what type of introvert you are, and you are a social introvert, then go back and listen to episode 116. And if you came out as a thinking introvert, then go and listen to 117, last week's episode, for strategies to help you use your introvert type to build a better business. This week we're talking about anxious introverts, and here at the 3Bs podcast we talk about business without pretending that it's always easy, and this is part 3 in our introvert series. So if you've ever replayed a conversation from 3 days ago when you're at home alone, overprepared for something super simple, or worried about what people think before you've even hit post, you might be joining me in this category. Yes, I am of the 4 introvert types most associated with the anxious introvert, which you may find surprising as somebody who comes on this podcast each week, posts on social media, talks on stage, wins Influencer of the Year at the Luca Awards. That overthinking though, it can get really loud. So let's talk about how to quieten the noise and build something really solid as a business owner without second guessing yourself every step of the way. And as I say, I am with you on this one. I do see parts of myself in other introvert types, and that's the thing. If you come out as 1 in the quiz, you may recognise yourself in 2, 3, or even all 4 of them. But the one that you feel most associated to is definitely the strategies I recommend you try first. And as I am an anxious introvert by nature, I feel like that is the most closely linked one to me. A lot of this is coming from experience. So these are strategies that help me, and I'm hoping they will help you too if you are an anxious introvert. So first things first, what is an anxious introvert? Anxious introverts don't just prefer quiet time, their minds won't switch off. And the difference between like a thinking introvert and an anxious introvert is that when they're alone, you're still replaying that conversation, you're still worrying and anxious about what was said, what people think about you. You're probably constantly thinking, did I come across okay? Did that come out okay? Or what if that post sounds stupid? Maybe I'm annoying people by talking about my offer yet again, when actually the truth of the matter is you could have talked about it 6 times that day and 90% of your followers wouldn't have seen any of them. So you might spend hours preparing something and still not feel ready. As I said in last week's episode, I think it was, I went and spoke on stage at Accountex back in May, and it's my first solo speaking engagement, and the talk was what we're talking about now, from introvert to influencer, the honest truths behind success, because transparency is really important to me. And when you listen back to the recording, you can hear the wobble in my voice. You can hear the anxiety sitting there in the back of my throat as I'm wondering what people are thinking of me whilst I'm trying to do it and still not really feeling ready, but pushing through the fear and doing it anyway. Now, I don't recommend that everyone needs to go and talk on stage if you're an anxious introvert, but I am living proof that it is possible if it's something you want to do to build your business forward. This is less about a fear of people and more about the fear of perception, how you're viewed, what people think. And when it comes to being a business owner, it causes a serious confidence block. But the thing is, your attention to detail is a gift. And what you have to learn to do is just to build it in safety, that feeling of safety, the systems and processes, and giving yourself permission to move before everything feels perfect. One of my favourite sayings is done is better than perfect, and it's something that I try to live by, and it's not always easy, but sometimes just trying to live that way really, really helps. So if you are an anxious introvert or feel like you are most closely resonating with an anxious introvert type, then here are some of the strategies that I've used to help me in business, and I'm hoping will help you to build a better business whilst playing to your introvert type as a strength, as a superpower, and not letting it hold yourself back. First strategy is to pre-decide your decisions. So if there are things that usually cause you stress, pre-decide these things. Decision making can feel like an absolute minefield when your anxiety is at a peak, when you're feeling very anxious. So the more you can preset rules for yourself, the easier it gets. Now, when we go to eat anywhere, whether I go out to eat with friends, family, colleagues, my network, whatever it may be, when I go out with clients, I will always get the menu and download the menu and check and give myself one or two options of what I'm going to have to eat. It used to be just one. I used to decide what I was going to eat before I got to the restaurant because it helped calm my anxiety. And then a couple of times we'd gone out somewhere and I'm the person that will always have a sea bass. If a sea bass on the menu, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to choose it first because I can't cook it well. And when it comes from a restaurant, it's always absolutely so delicious. So I think a couple of times we'd been to a particular restaurant and I knew what I was having. I'd pre-decided. I'd got myself ready to go out and I'd said, okay, I'm going to have the sea bass. And they say, oh, we haven't got any of that left, I'm afraid. And then the anxiety kicks in because you're like, I don't have a plan B. Like, I sort of preempted this. I hadn't really thought about what if they didn't have any of that. So now I always have two. I always have a backup, which sometimes causes decision paralysis when you're sat there not knowing which one you want. But I tend to always have a backup now to reduce that anxiety. And it works the same in business. Have a default pricing structure so you're not adjusting on the fly, so that you can stick to the rules that are written down, you can stick to the pricing that you've set. You're not having to try and move things around, you're not trying to do anything that causes you more stress. And if pricing is something that you struggle with, have a default pricing structure, have a default package, have a default price. That is what it is. If you want this, it's going to cost you this. I think that really helps. Another one that's really good is to just choose 2 core marketing platforms and ignore the rest. Now, when I say ignore the rest, I mean don't put your energy and time into it, but do repurpose your content onto other platforms just to give you a social presence across the various different platforms. So for me, it's LinkedIn first and foremost, and then it's Instagram. But when I post to Instagram, it's automatically posted to Facebook, for example. So the 2 core marketing platforms, the 2 platforms where I do my research, where my clients are, where I do the research into what's a hot topic, what's being discussed. The content that I curate is based on those 2 marketing platforms. Everything else I don't think about because it causes too much anxiety. I don't have TikTok, even though I keep promising to go on there. I don't use Facebook very often. I don't use X or Twitter very often either. My 2 main places, my 2 core marketing platforms are LinkedIn and Instagram. Even if you're watching this podcast on YouTube, that's not one of my core marketing platforms. It's where the podcast gets put, but the podcast is primarily made and then it goes to YouTube. I don't make it with YouTube in mind. And pre-schedule your content once a week so you're not agonizing over it daily. Have you ever had that feeling where you're like, I know I need to post today and I haven't posted today. I haven't posted on LinkedIn today and I know I need to. It gets like 6 p.m. and you're like, oh, what am I going to post? I just need to post something because I haven't posted yet. And that guru on the internet said I need to post every single day. Give yourself less chances to spiral. Give yourself less moments to get overwhelmed and add to your anxiety and stress. And you'll be surprised how freeing that really feels. I said a couple of weeks ago that I'm starting to sort of batch content. So all of these podcast recordings will have been done in a batch in one go. And then they'll be scheduled across the next 5 weeks. So the next 3 Monday mornings, I won't have that stress of I've got to get in and record the podcast because it's already done. I can then start planning the next batch of content. And again, just reducing that stress and pre-deciding your decisions can really help if you're an anxious introvert. Strategy number 2, use micro actions to build confidence. Anxious introverts often wait until something feels fully ready to act, and the done is better than perfect is a phrase I say regularly on the podcast, and it applies here because done is better than perfect. Anxious introverts wait until something feels ready and then they never really act on it. So instead of going big, just go small and consistent. Don't commit to posting every single day if that's going to cause too much anxiety. Commit to posting once a week. Commit to posting twice a week. Commit to posting 1 blog post a month. Whatever it is to reduce some of that chance to spiral. But whilst you're being consistent, you're going to build an audience that grows to wait for or grows to expect that blog post every month, that goes to expect that Friday post that you always put out on LinkedIn, for example. Launch to 5 warm leads instead of building a full funnel is another one that's great for service-based businesses, for high-ticket businesses, for anxious introverts who like to overthink everything and get anxious about it. So building a big audience is not something that comes naturally to them and adds a lot of stress. So have a smaller but quality over quantity leads and start converting them, rather than building that full sales funnel before you start actually putting out your offer. Bulk deciding your content for a month feels utterly terrifying to you. Just record one 60-second reel, because you can repurpose that anyway. Make sure it's evergreen. It doesn't have to be, but it could be evergreen, a 60-second reel that you change the sound, the wording. I like to think of it as B-roll. So it's just pressing record on one 60-second reel rather than planning that whole content calendar. And those small actions build confidence. So you do the one small thing and you're like, okay, I can do this now. Then you do the next small thing or the slightly bigger thing than the first thing, and it snowballs and it grows, and that confidence grows, and as it grows, the anxiety reduces over time. That's how I can be on here on video every week. When the podcast started, it was pre-recorded. I took more takes than I cared to even imagine. I was sat on my sofa in my pyjamas with a live mic clipped to my dressing gown, because that small step was all I could manage. If you'd have said to me, I need to launch a podcast, and if I'd have not made that decision and was trying to create a whole series of content and have all the videos and all the captions and all the fancy transitions and all the music sorted, this podcast would never have existed. So small actions build your confidence. Just like me standing on stage. I mean, I am great for a challenge. I am somebody who does not like to back down from a challenge, and that's not to do my introvert type, that's just me. If somebody challenges me or I challenge myself to something, I am there. I've got a tattoo on my leg of a race number because of a dare when I was in motorsports. Our little Janetta Juniors were 14 to 17-year-old, all in the same car. They were on the Toka package with the British Touring Car Championship. I loved going and helping the boys and girls down in the awnings, down in the paddock. And Greg Johnson was a Janetta Junior driver. In fact, he doesn't even race anymore, which is even funnier, so he didn't even go through the ranks. But somebody made a dare, or somebody made a bet that if he could get a podium, they'd get a tattoo of his race number. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm well up for that. I said, yeah, me too, count me in. I was like, I'll absolutely get a tattoo of your race number. And yeah, he got a podium. So I have the number 7, #7, tattooed on my leg. And then he gave up racing, which is even funnier. So compared to little Lando Norris and Louis Foster, who's now in the IndyCar, I'm not one to back down from a challenge, and I have a number 7 tattooed on my leg. So that's how I work. So doing things like going and talking on stage at Accountex, I wanted to win a Luca. I'd set myself that goal, I'd set myself that challenge, and I would take little steps to get to that. So to talk on stage, I started off with the podcast being recorded on audio. Then I moved to a couple of webinars for the ICB, a recorded webinar. Then it was a live webinar. Then I went into video on the podcast. And then I applied to speak on stage and didn't get it. And then I applied to speak on stage and did get it. And I did a panel stage on the Wednesday and then a solo stage on the Thursday. So again, it's those little tiny steps. Because if you'd have said to me 2 years ago, yeah, you're going to go and stand on stage and there'll be about 16,000 footfall over the 2 days, I wouldn't have slept for weeks. And I still get anxious and I still have massive anxiety attacks at times, and it takes me a lot of time to recover from those big things, but it all steps me forward. Those little micro steps are what got me there in the first place. If you're an anxious introvert like me, you don't need to be louder, bolder, or more fearless. You just need systems that reduce overthinking. You just need tiny actions that grow and build and scale and help you to build trust in yourself and your own ability, and a little bit of kindness when your brain's being really noisy and you can't close it off. Remember, you are not a bad business owner just because you're anxious. You are probably one of the most thoughtful people your clients will ever have the pleasure to work with, because you overthink. And overthinking is sometimes a good thing as long as it doesn't stop you from moving forward in your business. If you haven't taken the introvert quiz yet, now is a really great time. Even if you think you know what type you are, it will confirm it for you and give you practical tips and strategies to help you play to your strengths that work really well alongside these podcasts. The quiz link is in the show notes as always, or you'll find it on social media. And next week will be our last in the series with the restrained introvert, the calm, methodical, my fiance, who needs time to warm up but builds serious momentum once they do. If you found this episode useful, please do like, rate and review wherever you're listening to it in a podcast app. Share it on social media, send it to a business owner who you think is an anxious introvert and tell them it's okay and they can play to their strengths and still build a successful business. I'll see you next week for the next episode. Bye! And that brings us to the end of another episode of the 3Bs podcast. I hope you found it useful and that you're walking away with some motivation, inspiration, or education to help you build a better business. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and of course connect with us on social media for more insights, tips, and behind the scenes content. Your next step in building a better business is just a click away. I can't wait to connect with you, and I'll see you on the next episode. Bye!